My name is Megan, and I have been married to David for 12 years now. Our daughter Emma is 9, sensitive but with a resilient spirit that amazes me daily. Every year we attend the grand Christmas gathering at my in-laws' mansion, an event I have always secretly dreaded. This year was different though, because of what happened with the gifts. The tension with Victoria and Harold, my in-laws, finally reached its breaking point. If you are watching this, please like and subscribe, and let me know where you are viewing from. You will not believe what was in that envelope my husband pulled out. I grew up in a modest home in a small town in Ohio. My father worked as a plumber, and my mother was a part-time librarian. We never had much, but there was always enough love to go around. I became a kindergarten teacher because I adored children and believed in nurturing their potential from an early age. My classroom became my sanctuary, a place where every child was valued equally. I met David during my sophomore year of college. I was working part-time at the campus coffee shop to help pay for my education when he walked in one rainy afternoon. Unlike the other wealthy students who treated staff with indifference, David always made conversation and left generous tips. He was studying business, preparing to eventually join his family company, a manufacturing empire that had been in the family for 3 generations. Our romance was whirlwind and unexpected. David came from a world of country clubs, summer homes, and trust funds, while I worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. When he proposed after a year of dating, I was both elated and terrified about joining his world. The first time I met his parents was at their sprawling estate in Connecticut. Victoria, his mother, greeted me with a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. She was tall, impeccably dressed, and had the kind of posture that spoke of finishing schools and debutante balls. Harold, his father, was slightly warmer, but clearly skeptical of my background. The conversation over dinner that night was a subtle interrogation about my family education and aspirations. From the beginning, Victoria made it clear that I was not what she had envisioned for her son. There were constant references to other suitable young women from their social circle, comments about my career being sweet but unnecessary. Once you have children, and questions about when I would elevate my wardrobe to something more appropriate. David always defended me, but in the gentle, non-confrontational way that I would later recognize as a survival mechanism, developed over years of navigating his parents' expectations. He genuinely believed they would eventually see what he saw in me. The annual Christmas gatherings at the family estate were particularly difficult. Each year, all extended family members would converge for 3 days of festivities that felt more like performances than celebrations. There were strict dress codes for each event, seating arrangements, based on some mysterious hierarchy, and gift exchanges that seemed designed to highlight status differences. After our wedding, David and I struggled with infertility for 3 years. Those were dark times, made worse by Victoria. Constant inquiries about when we would produce an heir, preferably a boy to carry on the family name. When we finally announced my pregnancy, her first question was whether we had done genetic testing to determine the sex. The disappointment on her face when we revealed we were having a girl was unmistakable. Emma was born on a snowy December morning, perfect in every way. David cried when he held her, promising to always protect her from anything that might dim her light. Harold seemed genuinely charmed by his granddaughter, often sneaking away from business calls to rock her or read to her. Victoria, however, maintained a polite distance, treating Emma more like a delicate object than a beloved grandchild. As Emma grew, we noticed a disturbing pattern. Victoria lavished attention and gifts on Travis and Allison children, particularly their sons. At family gatherings, Emma would be seated at the far end of the children table, while her cousins occupied places of honor near the adults. During summer visits to the family lake house, the boys would be taken fishing with Harold, while Emma was left behind, with suggestions that perhaps she would prefer to help in the kitchen. David noticed these slights, but often excused them as his mother being from a different generation or not knowing how to relate to little girls. I bit my tongue to keep the peace, but each incident carved a deeper wound in my heart. This year leading up to Christmas had been unusual. David had been working longer hours than ever, often coming home after Emma was asleep. He seemed distracted constantly on his phone in hushed conversations. When I expressed concern, he assured me he was working on something important that would make everything better. 2 weeks before Christmas, his demeanor changed dramatically. He became relaxed, confident, almost mischievous. He started dropping hints about this year Christmas being special and asking me to trust him. Despite my reservations about spending yet another holiday navigating family politics, his enthusiasm was contagious. Perhaps I thought things would finally be different. The night before we were set to leave for the estate, David sat me down after Emma went to bed. He held my hands and looked directly into my eyes. "I need you to know something," he said, his voice steady and determined. "Tomorrow is going to be challenging, but I promise you, by the end of it, everything will change. Can you trust me one more time?" Something in his expression, a mixture of resolve and liberation, made me believe him. I nodded, though anxiety still fluttered in my stomach. Whatever he had planned, I knew it was significant. As we packed our car the next morning, Emma chattering excitedly about seeing her cousins, I caught David slipping a thick envelope into his suit jacket pocket. When he noticed me watching, he simply winked and said insurance policy. Little did I know how prophetic those words would prove to be. The drive to the estate took nearly 3 hours, with Emma singing Christmas carols in the back seat, and David unusually quiet behind the wheel. As we turned onto the private road leading to his parents' property, the mansion came into view like something from a fairy tale, but one with an undercurrent of menace. The 3-story colonial-style home was wrapped in thousands of white lights, with giant wreaths adorning each window. Professional decorators had transformed the grounds into a winter wonderland, complete with life-sized nutcrackers flanking the entrance and a towering Norwegian spruce visible through the foyer windows. David squeezed my hand before we exited the car. "Remember what I said, trust me." The front door opened before we could ring the bell. Victoria stood there in a crimson cashmere sweater and pearls her silver hair perfectly coiffed. Her smile was cool as she air-kissed David's cheeks. "Darling, you have lost weight. Are you eating properly?" Her gaze shifted to me, taking in my simple green dress with a barely perceptible flicker of disapproval. "Megan, how nice to see you. I trust the drive was uneventful." She bent slightly toward Emma, not quite at her level. "And Emma, my goodness, you have grown." Harold appeared behind his wife, his ruddy face breaking into a genuine smile. Unlike Victoria, he embraced each of us, warmly lifting Emma for a proper grandfather hug. "There she is, my Christmas angel. I have been waiting all year to see you." He set her down and whispered conspiratorially, "I might have something special in my study for young ladies who like adventure books." Victoria pursed her lips. "Harold, do not spoil the gift exchange. You know we open presents together after dinner." We followed them into the grand foyer where a cacophony of voices spilled from the adjacent rooms. The house was already full of relatives, some I recognized from previous gatherings, and others who seemed to materialize only for major events. Travis, David's brother, approached with a tumbler of whiskey in hand. He was 5 years younger than David, but carried himself with the entitlement of the current favorite. His wife Kimberly trailed behind him, designer-clad and surgical-enhanced. Big brother, fashionably late as always. Travis clapped David on the shoulder with excessive force. "Dad was just talking about the Sullivan acquisition. Sounds like you have been dropping the ball on that one." David's smile remained fixed. "Nice to see you too, Travis. How is the new boat?" Travis launched into a detailed description of his latest yacht purchase, while Kimberly drew me aside with fake warmth. "Megan, that dress is so understated. You always manage to look appropriate on such a budget." Before I could respond, their children thundered down the main staircase. 12-year-old Tyler and 10-year-old James barely acknowledged us before demanding to know when lunch would be served. Their 7-year-old sister Sophia, dressed in a velvet dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary, gave Emma a dismissive once-over. "Your headband is so last year," she informed my daughter before flouncing away. I felt Emma shrink beside me, her hand tightening in mine. I knelt down and whispered, "Remember what we talked about. Their opinion of you does not define your worth." She nodded bravely, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. Allison, David's sister, made her entrance next, surrounded by her 3 children. Unlike Travis' brash arrogance, Allison weaponized refinement. She was Victoria in miniature, from her patrician features to her passive-aggressive compliments. "Megan, Emma. How wonderful that you could join us again this year. Emma, the children are watching Christmas movies in the theater room. Perhaps you would like to join them. Though I believe they have already started the film." Translation: You are late, and my children should not have to restart their entertainment for your benefit. Throughout the afternoon, I noticed strange glances passing between family members. Conversations would halt abruptly when David or I approached. Even Harold, usually a buffer against Victoria frostiness, seemed to be avoiding direct interaction with us. During a moment alone in the kitchen, while helping the catering staff, something Victoria had suggested would be more comfortable for me than the adults gathering in the drawing room, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. "Victoria is beside herself," said a voice. I recognized as Aunt Patricia, Harold's sister. To think that David would jeopardize everything over some misguided principle. "Well, the board meeting did not go as she planned," replied Uncle George, Victoria brother. "Harold is trying to smooth things over, but you know how these things go. Once trust is broken." They moved out of earshot, leaving me clutching a tray of canapés with trembling hands. What had David done? What board meeting? He had never mentioned any unusual business developments. When I finally located him among a group of male relatives discussing politics, his demeanor confused me further. Rather than seeming troubled, he appeared almost buoyant, nodding along to conversations, but clearly thinking about something else entirely. When our eyes met across the room, he gave me a reassuring wink. Just before dinner, I managed to pull him into a quiet alcove off the main hallway. "What is going on?" I demanded in a hushed voice. "Everyone is acting strange, and I overheard something about a board meeting and broken trust." David took my hands in his. "I promised you everything would change after today, and it will. Just wait until the gift exchange. Can you hold on until then?" Something in his eyes, a mixture of anticipation and resolve, calmed my racing heart. I nodded slowly. "Just tell me one thing. Are we going to be okay? Is Emma going to be okay?" His smile was radiant. "Better than okay. For the first time since I can remember, we are going to be exactly who we were meant to be." The dining room at Victoria and Harold Estate could comfortably seat 30 people beneath a crystal chandelier that had allegedly once hung in a European palace. The table, a single piece of mahogany, polished to a mirror shine, stretched beneath windows that showcased the snow-covered gardens, now illuminated by strategic lighting. As expected, our family was seated at the far end of the table, the Siberia of the dining arrangement. Emma was placed at the children's table several feet away, while Tyler, James, and Sophia mysteriously had places next to their parents at the main table. I caught Emma's glance of confusion as she realized she was the only grandchild relegated to the children's section. The 7-course meal was a parade of culinary extravagance. Each dish emerged from the kitchen, like a performance piece, described in loving detail by the private chef Victoria had hired from a Michelin-starred restaurant in New York. Wine flowed freely, each bottle introduced with its provenance and price point, thinly veiled as tasting notes. Throughout the first several courses, conversation revolved around family business matters from which David was conspicuously excluded. Travis dominated these discussions, frequently referencing meetings David had apparently missed and decisions made in his absence. "The expansion into Asian markets is proceeding ahead of schedule," Travis announced, directing his comments to Harold while pointedly ignoring David. The board was initially concerned about the timeline, but I assured them we could accelerate without compromising quality. Harold nodded absently, his eyes occasionally drifting to David with an unreadable expression. Victoria, seated at the opposite end of the table in her traditional position, as hostess, maintained perfect composure while orchestrating the flow of conversation with subtle gestures and well-timed interjections. During the fish course, she turned her attention to me with precision timing that ensured maximum audience. "Megan, I was just telling Judith about your charming background," she said, referencing a distant cousin whose husband apparently owned half of Rhode Island. "It must be so rewarding working with young children, though I imagine the salary leaves much to be desired." Before I could respond, she continued, "It is admirable, really choosing fulfillment over financial security. Not everyone has that luxury, of course." The implication was clear. I had such luxury only because of my marriage to her son. "Actually," David interjected from beside me, "Megan was recently offered a position developing curriculum for a prestigious educational publisher. They specifically sought her out based on her innovative teaching methods." This was true, though. I had not yet decided whether to accept the offer. The surprise on Victoria's face was quickly masked. "How lovely," she said dismissively before turning to more important matters. "And Harold, do tell everyone about the new wing we are adding to the hospital board." Throughout the meal, I kept one eye on Emma, at the children's table. My heart ached as I watched her attempts to engage with her second cousins, some of whom she saw only at these annual gatherings. The older children largely ignored her, while the younger ones followed their lead. She eventually gave up and focused on her food, her little shoulders slightly hunched. Midway through the main course, Harold made an unexpected attempt to include David in the business conversation. "Son, what do you think about the new production facility proposal? You always had a good head for operational efficiency." Before David could answer, Travis cut in smoothly. "Dad, remember David has been focused on his special projects lately. He probably is not up to speed on the proposal details." An uncomfortable silence fell over that section of the table. I felt David tense beside me, but when I glanced at him, his expression remained neutral, almost amused. "Actually," David said calmly, "I think the Madison site makes more sense than the Greenfield location. Despite the higher initial investment, the tax incentives and proximity to the interstate would offset costs within 3 years." Harold's eyes lit up with something like pride, while Travis scowled into his wine glass. Victoria cleared her throat delicately. "Perhaps we could reserve business talk for after dinner," she suggested. Kimberly was just about to share news about Tyler's achievements at his fencing championship. As dessert was being served, I excused myself to use the restroom, taking a moment to check on Emma and whisper words of encouragement. On my return, I took a wrong turn down an unfamiliar hallway and accidentally stumbled upon Victoria and Allison in heated conversation in a small study. "It is absolutely unconscionable," Victoria was saying, her voice tight with controlled anger. "After everything your father has done for him, the sacrifices we have made." Allison nodded sympathetically. "The family legacy means nothing to him anymore. It is that wife of his filling his head with ideas about independence and making his own way. Well, he will regret it when the trust implications become clear," Victoria replied. "Harold might be having second thoughts, but I certainly am not. The inheritance structure leaves no room for sentimentality." I backed away silently, heart pounding. Was David being disinherited? Was that what all the strange behavior was about? I hurried back to the dining room, arriving just as Victoria was announcing it was time to move to the living room for the gift exchange. David must have sensed my distress, because he took my hand under the table and squeezed it reassuringly. When I tried to whisper what I had overheard, he simply shook his head slightly. "It does not matter anymore," he murmured. "None of it does." I did not understand what he meant, but there was no time to press further as everyone began rising from the table. Emma came running to my side, her earlier isolation momentarily forgotten in the excitement of presents to come. As we filed out of the dining room, I noticed David pat the inside pocket of his jacket, checking that the mysterious envelope was still there. Whatever was coming, we were about to find out. The living room had been transformed into a showcase of wealth, disguised as holiday cheer. A 14-foot tree dominated one corner, decorated not with homemade ornaments or sentimental keepsakes, but with color-coordinated glass baubles and antique collectibles. Beneath it lay a mountain of professionally wrapped presents, each with calligraphed name tags. Victoria orchestrated the gift exchange with the precision of a military operation. The adults were to exchange their gifts, first followed by the children, in order of age oldest to youngest. This tradition conveniently meant that Travis' children always received their gifts before Emma, building her anticipation to an almost cruel degree. The adult exchange proceeded with polite exclamations over luxury items, cashmere sweaters, limited edition watches, rare wines, and spa vouchers. David and I had spent weeks selecting thoughtful gifts within our budget, but they looked paltry next to the extravagance from other family members. Victoria barely glanced at the artisan pottery bowl we had given her, while Harold seemed genuinely pleased with the first edition novel David had tracked down by his favorite author. When our turn came to open gifts, Victoria presented me with a cooking class voucher. Since you mentioned wanting to improve your skills in the kitchen, I had never expressed any such desire. David received an expensive tie that Victoria pointed out would be perfect for important business meetings, should such opportunities arise again. Finally, it was time for the children. Victoria made a show of selecting beautifully wrapped packages from beneath the tree, calling each child forward to receive their gift with a personal comment about how special they were. Tyler went first, tearing into a large box to reveal the latest gaming console plus 5 games. For our brilliant competitor, Victoria announced, to reward your focus and determination. James was next, receiving an impressive drone with camera attachments. For our little engineer to encourage your technical mind. Sophia squealed with delight at her new tablet, already loaded with apps and a sparkly protective case. For our beautiful princess who brings such grace to our family. One by one, each cousin was called forward. Even the children of distant relatives received carefully selected gifts, science kits, for the academically inclined, sports equipment, for the athletic ones, musical instruments for the artistically talented. Throughout the process, Emma sat quietly on the edge of her seat, her eyes growing wider with each name called. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, occasionally brushing down her Christmas dress, the one she had specifically chosen, because it matched the colors in the family Christmas photo from last year. I could feel her growing tension as the pile of gifts dwindled. David placed his hand on my knee, silently asking me to wait. But every maternal instinct in my body was screaming to protect my child from the humiliation I could see coming. Finally, Victoria announced the last name, and for little Matthew, our newest family member, a special teddy bear to welcome you to your first Lawrence family Christmas. She handed a plush bear to cousin Judy, infant son, who promptly tried to eat its ear. The gift distribution was clearly over. Emma sat frozen, her eyes fixed on her empty hands. A heavy silence fell over the room, as several adults realized what had happened. I saw Harold frown and whisper something to Victoria, who waved him off with a dismissive gesture. I was halfway out of my seat, rage building in my chest, when Emma's small voice stopped me. "It is okay, Mommy," she said, her chin trembling slightly but her voice steady. "Maybe Santa will bring something tomorrow." The quiet dignity in her voice broke something in me. My 9-year-old daughter was showing more grace than this room full of adults. David's hand on my arm tightened, holding me in place. Victoria, perhaps sensing the growing discomfort in the room, gave a practiced laugh. Oh goodness, did we miss one? The gifts for Emma must have been misplaced. So many presents this year, it is easy to lose track. The excuse was flimsy and insincere. Several family members shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. Allison leaned over to her mother. "Perhaps it was left upstairs in the guest room. Should I go check?" Victoria shook her head slightly. "I am sure we can sort it out tomorrow. Emma understands. Do you not, dear? These things happen." Emma nodded politely, but I could see the hurt in her eyes, the understanding that this was no mistake. My heart was shattering for her, and I was seconds away from grabbing our coats and walking out when David stood up. David rose to his feet, with a deliberate slowness that immediately commanded attention. His posture was relaxed, but authoritative, a stance I had rarely seen him take in his parents' home. The room gradually fell silent as he cleared his throat. "Before we conclude the gift exchange," he said, his voice carrying easily across the room, "there is one more present that needs to be opened." Victoria fluttered her hand dismissively. "David, darling, we have finished the gifts. Perhaps whatever you have can be added to tomorrow morning's stocking tradition." David's smile was unwavering. "No, Mother. This particular gift was specifically meant to be opened last. It is rather important." He reached into his jacket and pulled out the envelope I had seen him checking throughout the evening. It was cream-colored and thick-sealed, with what looked like a company logo I did not recognize. Victoria's face tightened. "We have a schedule to keep, David. The servers are waiting to clear the wrapping paper before coffee and dessert." "The servers can wait 5 more minutes," David replied, a new firmness in his tone that seemed to surprise everyone, particularly his mother. "I would appreciate everyone remaining seated for just a moment longer." Harold shifted in his seat, looking suddenly alert and curious. Travis and Allison exchanged confused glances. David walked across the room to where Emma sat still composed, despite her disappointment. He knelt down to her level, something I had noticed Victoria never did. "Emma," he said, his voice gentle but clear enough for everyone to hear, "sometimes the most important gifts do not come in large boxes or with fancy wrapping. Sometimes they represent something much bigger, something that will last much longer than toys or games." He held out the envelope to her. "This is from both your mom and me, though I did the paperwork. It represents our love for you and our hopes for your future." Emma took the envelope carefully, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Should I open it now, Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart. Everyone is waiting to see what it is." With deliberate care, Emma broke the seal and pulled out several official-looking documents. As a 9-year-old, she obviously could not understand their significance, but she studied them seriously nonetheless. "Can you tell me what it says, Daddy? There are a lot of big words." David gently took the papers and stood keeping one arm around Emma's shoulders. He looked directly at his parents as he began to explain. "6 months ago I left Lawrence Manufacturing," he announced to the room. A murmur ran through the assembled family members. Victoria's face drained of color. "As some of you already know, I started my own company, Phoenix Innovation Group. What you may not know is that we secured Series A funding 3 months ago, at a valuation of $54 million, roughly twice what Lawrence Manufacturing is currently worth." Travis choked on his drink. Allison's manicured hand flew to her mouth. David continued, his voice steady. "These documents establish the Emma Lawrence Trust, which owns 20% of Phoenix Innovation Group. Another 30% is held by Megan, and I retain 50% as founder and CEO." He looked down at our daughter with a smile. "Which means, Emma, that you are now part owner of a company that makes advanced medical devices that help people with heart problems. The trust will provide for your education and future, and one day, if you choose, you can help run the company." Emma's eyes widened. "I own part of a company that helps people's hearts." "You do, because you have the biggest heart of anyone I know, and I want you to always remember how valuable that is." Victoria had recovered enough to interject, her voice brittle. "David, this is hardly appropriate conversation for Christmas Eve. The children do not need to be burdened with business matters." David laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him. "On the contrary, Mother. I thought Lawrence family tradition placed the highest value on legacy and inheritance. Is that not what tonight's gift exchange is really about, establishing who matters and who does not?" Harold stood now, his expression unreadable. "Son, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No, Dad. I have spent my entire life discussing things privately, avoiding confrontation, accepting the family hierarchy. Not anymore." David tightened his arm around Emma. When I saw the look on my daughter's face tonight, when she realized she had been deliberately excluded from the gifts, something finally broke. The last thread holding me to this toxic family dynamic snapped. He addressed the room at large. I did not leave the family business on a whim, or because I could not handle the pressure, as some of you have been told. I left because I watched how my daughter was treated at every family gathering, the subtle and not so subtle ways she was deemed less than her cousins. I left because no company is worth sacrificing my child's sense of self-worth. Victoria's face had transformed from shock to cold anger. You have always been dramatic, David. No one has mistreated Emma. Children are simply sensitive and imagine slights where none exist. David's expression hardened. Are you suggesting Emma imagined not receiving any gifts tonight while every other child down to a 6-month-old who cannot even hold a toy received something? Victoria had no immediate response to that. Harold spoke up, his voice, carrying the weight of authority he had wielded as CEO for decades. David, what you have done, starting a competing business without discussing it with the family, is unprecedented. The board will have questions about proprietary knowledge, non-compete clauses. All handled, legally and ethically. David interrupted. I developed entirely new technology in a different sector. Phoenix does not compete with Lawrence Manufacturing in any market. I made sure of that, out of respect for what you built, Dad. He turned to face his father directly. But I will not sacrifice my daughter's future or happiness for a company that was never going to fully accept her or her mother. The room had gone completely silent. Even the younger children seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Travis finally broke the tension with a forced laugh. Well, congratulations, brother. Though $54 million is a rather optimistic valuation for a startup, is not it. David's smile was serene. Our first product received FDA approval last month. We have orders from 17 hospital systems and are in negotiations with 4 international distributors. Our projections for next year put us at nearly $80 million in revenue. Feel free to ask your financial advisor if that valuation is optimistic. Travis' smile froze. Kimberly suddenly became very interested in adjusting her bracelet. Throughout this entire exchange, Emma had been watching the adults with wide eyes. Now she tugged on David's sleeve. Does this mean I got a present after all? She asked loud enough for everyone to hear. David kneeled down again. You got much more than a present, Emma. You got a future where you never have to feel less than anyone else. And that is the best gift I could think of. The silence that followed Emma's innocent question was deafening. For several seconds no one moved or spoke. Then, like a dam breaking, the room erupted in chaotic responses. Victoria rose from her chair, her composure finally cracking. This is outrageous. To use Christmas Eve for such a theatrical announcement. To embarrass the family this way in front of everyone. Harold stepped toward his son, his expression conflicted. David, we should discuss this privately. There are aspects to this situation you may not fully understand. Travis was already on his phone, presumably contacting someone to verify David's claims about Phoenix Innovation Group. Allison was whispering furiously to her husband, while various aunts, uncles, and cousins either pretended to be fascinated by their dessert plates or openly gawked at the unfolding drama. I moved to Emma's side, placing my arm around her protectively. Despite the adult chaos swirling around us, she seemed remarkably calm, looking up at her father with unwavering trust. Is Grandma angry because I own part of a company? She asked loud enough for those nearby to hear. No, sweetheart, I answered, smoothing her hair. Adults sometimes have complicated feelings about change. That is all. David turned to me. I think it might be best if you take Emma upstairs for a little while. This conversation is overdue, but she does not need to hear all of it. I nodded, understanding the gift he was giving me, the chance to shelter our daughter from the ugliness that was likely to follow. I took Emma's hand and led her toward the doorway. But what about dessert? She whispered as we left. I think we will have our own special dessert a little later, I promised, an idea already forming. Once Emma and I had gone upstairs to the guest room assigned to us, the confrontation continued in the living room. David later told me everything that happened in our absence. Victoria had immediately launched into accusations, her voice tight with controlled fury. "How dare you ambush us this way? After everything we have done for you, the opportunities we have given you, the connections we have provided." David remained standing calm in the face of her anger. "What exactly have you done for me? Mother pressured me into a career I never wanted, criticized every choice I have made, treated my wife with barely concealed disdain, ignored my daughter, except when it was socially necessary to acknowledge her." Harold attempted to intervene. "Son, your mother has always wanted what is best for you for the family." "No, Dad," David countered. "She has wanted what is best for her vision of this family, which has never included Megan or Emma as full members." Victoria scoffed. "This is absurd. You have always been overly sensitive, David. If your wife feels unwelcome, perhaps it is because she has made so little effort to adapt to our way of life. And children always imagine slights where none exist." David's voice remained level, but his words were precise and cutting. Emma did not imagine being the only child without a gift tonight. She did not imagine being seated away from the family at Thanksgiving last year, while her cousins sat with the adults. She did not imagine being excluded from the sailing lessons you arranged for all the other grandchildren last summer. He took a step toward his mother. "For years I told myself these were oversights, not deliberate cruelties. I made excuses for you to Megan, to Emma, and worst of all to myself. No more." Victoria glanced around at the other family members, many of whom were now avoiding her gaze, uncomfortable with the truth being spoken so plainly. "You have clearly been planning this dramatic exit for some time," she said, attempting to regain control of the narrative. "I suppose you expect us to be impressed with your little startup, to come begging for reconciliation now that you have had your tantrum." David laughed, the sound genuinely amused rather than bitter. "That is the difference between us, Mother. I do not need or want anything from you anymore. I did not build Phoenix to impress you, or to compete with the family business. I built it to create something meaningful, something I could be proud to pass on to my daughter one day, if she wants it." Harold had been watching this exchange with growing awareness. Now he stepped forward. "David, I had no idea you felt this way about the company, about your place in the family. I tried to tell you many times, Dad, but you always deferred to Mother on family matters, and she never wanted to hear it." Harold turned to his wife, something shifting in his expression. "Victoria, did you deliberately exclude Emma from the gifts tonight?" Victoria straightened her spine. "I simply forgot to purchase something for her. With so many grandchildren now, it is difficult to keep track." "That is a lie," Allison suddenly interjected, surprising everyone. All eyes turned to her. "Mother, I heard you tell Kimberly last week that you had decided not to get Emma anything this year because, and I quote, 'David needs to understand, there are consequences to disloyalty.'" A collective gasp went through the room. Kimberly flushed red and studied her manicure intensely. Harold's face darkened. "Victoria, tell me this is not true." Victoria's mouth opened and closed, but for perhaps the first time in her life, she had no ready response. David's voice was quiet when he spoke again. "We will be leaving tonight. Emma deserves to wake up Christmas morning somewhere she is truly wanted and valued." At this point, I had returned to the doorway of the living room, having settled Emma with a book upstairs. I heard David's final statement and moved to his side, taking his hand in silent support. Victoria made one last attempt to regain control. "You are overreacting as usual. No one is asking you to leave. This can all be sorted out reasonably in the morning." David shook his head. "No, Mother. Some things cannot be reasoned away or smoothed over with polite fictions. Using my 9-year-old daughter as a pawn, in whatever game you are playing, crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed." He turned to his father. "Dad, I am sorry it has come to this. Despite everything, I have always respected what you built, and the values you tried to instill in me. I hope someday we can find a way forward." Harold nodded solemnly. "I would like that, son." As David and I turned to leave, Travis called out, "So, that is it. You are just walking away from everything, from your birthright." David paused and looked back at his brother. "I am not walking away from anything that truly matters, Travis. I am walking toward the future I want for my family. There is a difference." Upstairs, we quickly packed our bags while explaining to Emma that we had decided to have a special Christmas Eve adventure. Rather than seeing disappointment in her eyes, I saw relief. She had always been more perceptive than we gave her credit for. "Are we going home?" she asked as she helped gather her things. David knelt down to her level. "Actually, I have a surprise. I booked us a suite at the Grand Hotel in the city. They have a special Christmas package with room service dessert buffet and a view of the holiday lights in the park." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? Just the three of us?" "Just the three of us," I confirmed, my heart swelling at her excitement over something so simple as being alone with her parents. As we carried our bags downstairs, Harold was waiting alone in the foyer. Victoria and the others had apparently retreated elsewhere, unable or unwilling to witness our departure. "David," Harold said, his voice heavy with emotion, "I want you to know I had no idea about the gift. About any of it, really. I have been so focused on the business that I missed what was happening in my own family." David's expression softened slightly. "I believe you, Dad. But knowing and not seeing are different things." Harold nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. He turned to Emma. "I have something for you, Emma. I was saving it for tomorrow morning, but I think you should have it now." He handed her a small wrapped package. Inside was a beautiful compass in a wooden case, clearly an antique. "This belonged to my father," Harold explained. "He gave it to me when I was about your age. He told me it would always help me find my way home no matter how far I traveled." Emma studied the compass with appropriate reverence. "Thank you, Grandpa." "You are very welcome." Harold's voice was gruff with emotion. "Your father is a good man, Emma. I hope you know that." "I do," she replied simply. "He is the best dad ever." As we loaded our bags into the car, David was unusually quiet. Once Emma was buckled in the back seat, I touched his arm. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. He took a deep breath. "For the first time in longer than I can remember, I think I actually am." Christmas morning dawned, clear and bright sunlight, streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our hotel suite. Emma woke us by bouncing on the foot of our bed, her excitement palpable. "Mom, Dad, wake up, Santa found us even though we changed places." David and I exchanged sleepy smiles. We had stayed up late arranging the presents we had brought with us, adding a few emergency purchases from the hotel gift shop to make the display more impressive. The suite living room now featured a small tabletop tree the hotel had provided, beneath which lay a colorful array of gifts. As Emma tore into her presents with typical 9-year-old enthusiasm, I found myself reflecting on the events of the previous night. The hurt and anger were still there, but they were overshadowed by an unexpected sense of liberation. For years I had contorted myself trying to fit into the Lawrence family mold, making excuses for their behavior, blaming myself for not being good enough. Now that charade was over. David's phone rang, while Emma was absorbed with a new art set. It was his father. "Merry Christmas, Dad," David said, his voice cautious, but not cold. I could not hear Harold's response, but I watched as David's expression shifted from wariness to surprise, and finally to something like hope. "I appreciate that, Dad. It means a lot. Yes, she is right here having the time of her life with her presents. Of course we can talk more after the holidays. I would like that." When he hung up, David's eyes were suspiciously bright. Dad apologized. Really apologized. Not just a superficial, sorry if feelings were hurt kind of thing. He said he spent most of the night thinking about what happened about the past several years, really. "What about Victoria?" I asked quietly. David's smile was sad but resigned. "Mom is Mom. Dad said she is still insisting this was all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But he also said, and this is a direct quote, 'For the first time in 45 years of marriage, I am not backing down to keep the peace.'" Later that morning, we enjoyed room service breakfast in our pajamas, another small rebellion against Victoria's rigid protocols. Emma declared it the best Christmas ever, as she dipped strawberries in whipped cream, a treat that would never have been allowed at the Lawrence family table. "Can we do this every year?" she asked, chocolate smeared adorably on her cheek. David and I exchanged glances. "We can certainly make our own traditions from now on," I told her. "Christmas should be about joy and love, not stress and formality." "And presents," Emma added, seriously, making us both laugh. David reached for my hand across the table. "I should have done this years ago. I kept hoping things would change, that my parents would eventually see how special you both are." I squeezed his fingers. "You did it when it mattered most. When Emma was old enough to truly understand what was happening, but young enough that she will not carry the scars into adulthood." As the day progressed, we ventured out to explore the city Christmas displays. Emma skipped between us, pointing out decorations and chattering excitedly about her new part ownership of a company that fixes hearts. "Can I visit the company sometime?" she asked David. "I want to see how the heart helpers work." "Absolutely," he promised. "After the holidays, I will take you on a full tour. You can meet the engineers and scientists who design the devices." "Maybe I will be an engineer when I grow up," she declared. "Or a scientist. Or maybe the boss. Like you, Daddy." "You can be anything you want to be," I told her, marveling at how different this was from the messages she received at Lawrence family gatherings, where girls were subtly but consistently guided toward decorative, rather than substantial, pursuits. 6 months later, on a warm June day, I stood in the reception area of Phoenix Innovation Group, watching through the glass walls of the conference room as David presented the company quarterly results to his team. The growth had exceeded even his optimistic projections, with new hospitals signing contracts weekly and international expansion well underway. Emma sat beside him, having been allowed to leave school early for what David called future CEO training. She was supposed to be quietly drawing, but I could see her paying attention to the presentation, occasionally asking questions that made the adults around the table smile appreciatively. My phone buzzed with a message from Harold. Since Christmas, he had made consistent efforts to rebuild his relationship with David and to establish a real connection with Emma. Victoria remained distant, still unable or unwilling to acknowledge her role in the family fracture. But Harold had surprised us all with his capacity for change. "Dinner's still on for Saturday," his text read. "Found a children's science museum Emma might enjoy beforehand." I smiled as I replied affirmatively. The boundaries we had established were clear: respect for our family unit was non-negotiable, and any hint of the old patterns would result in immediate distance. So far, Harold had honored these terms without complaint. My own career had taken an unexpected turn as well. After accepting the curriculum development position, I had discovered a passion for creating educational materials that reached beyond traditional approaches. With David's encouragement, I had recently founded a small educational consulting firm focused on helping schools implement more inclusive and creative teaching methods. As the meeting concluded and people filed out of the conference room, Emma spotted me and raced over. "Mom, Dad says I can help design the new logo for the kids' version of the heart monitor. I already have ideas." David followed at a more sedate pace, winking at me over her head. "Our marketing team might have some input too, but Emma's artistic vision is pretty compelling." "I bet it is," I agreed, ruffling her hair. "Ready to head home? We can stop for ice cream on the way." As we walked to the car, Emma between us, holding both our hands and occasionally jumping to swing herself forward, I marveled at how different she was from the child who had sat quiet and hurt at last year's Christmas gathering. She was confident, enthusiastic, secure in the knowledge that she was valued and loved. Later that evening, after Emma had gone to bed, David and I sat on the back porch of our home, enjoying the summer twilight. It was not the mansion he had grown up in, but it was warm and welcoming, and truly ours. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked, voicing a question that occasionally still nagged at me Walking away from your family legacy, the security, the connections. David considered the question seriously. No, he finally said. What I regret is not doing it sooner. I regret the years Emma spent, thinking she somehow was not good enough for my family approval. I regret the stress you endured, trying to navigate impossible expectations. He reached for my hand. But mostly I am just grateful. That envelope contained more than company ownership papers. It contained our declaration of independence from toxic family dynamics. It gave us permission to create our own legacy, based on love and mutual respect, rather than obligation and appearances. I leaned my head against his shoulder. When you pulled out that envelope, I had no idea how completely it would change our lives. Neither did I, he admitted. I just knew I could not bear to see Emma's face when she realized she had been deliberately excluded one more time. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the evening sounds of our neighborhood. Family is not always what we are born into, I said finally. Sometimes it is what we choose to create. David nodded. And that is the gift I want Emma to carry forward long after Phoenix Innovation Group has evolved into something we cannot even imagine today. The knowledge that she is worthy of respect and love exactly as she is. That she never needs to diminish herself to fit someone else's expectations. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I thought about the journey we had taken since last Christmas. The hurt had not disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something valuable, a foundation upon which we had built something stronger and more authentic than what had existed before. Family can be our greatest source of pain or our greatest source of strength. Sometimes it takes an envelope, a moment of standing firm in your truth, to discover which one yours will be. Have you ever had to make a difficult stand for someone you love? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the greatest gift we can give our children is the courage to break unhealthy patterns. Thank you for listening, and remember that the family you choose to create can be your most powerful legacy.